All right, so we're starting Unit 2, which is compute with multi-digit numbers. Okay, and if you see, there's a very short unit, and up there on the board on the word wall, it's a very short one. You'll see that. Okay, so today we're going to do Chapter 3, Lesson 1, and we're going to add and subtract decimals. So for the warm-up, it says one event in competitive swimming is the women's 100-meter butterfly. The table shows the times of different swimmers at a recent Olympics. Number 1 says you can use place value charts to compare results. So number 1 says it took Christine Magnuson 0.37 seconds longer to finish than Lisbeth Trickett. What was Magnuson's time in seconds? So, if she finished 0.37 seconds longer, what operation am I going to do there? Add or subtract? We're going to add. Very good. So here, we're going to add. Now, I want to bring it to your attention that we've got place values here. Does everybody see the place values? Okay, where you have the decimal, and before the decimal are the whole numbers, right? The ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, right? Then behind the decimal, you have the tenths and the hundredths, right? So those are the behind the decimal. Those are like the partials, like the fractional parts. All right, so here we're going to add. So when we add, you see here we have 56.73, and we're going to add 0.37. Okay, this is 56 and 73 hundredths and 37 hundredths. When we add decimals, you see how these decimals right here, the decimal places in each of the numbers are lined up. Okay, you need to make sure you line them up. And then you just add like normal. So 7 plus 3, 10. So you put a 0 here, you carry the 1, right? Then we have 7 plus 3, that's 10, plus 1, that's 11. And then you carry the 1. And then 6 plus 0 is 0, plus the carried 1 is 7. And then we bring down the 5. Is everybody clear? All right. Number 2 says, at a high school meet, a swimmer swam the women's 100-meter butterfly in 72.34 seconds. How many seconds faster did Gabriela Silva swim her race? Would that be addition or subtraction? Subtraction. Very good, because we want to know how much faster she swam, right? So you line up your decimals and you subtract like normal. So what did you get when you subtracted? We got 14.24. Okay? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add decimals. It says here to add decimals, you're going to line up the decimal points, then add the digits in the same place value position. So here, adding decimals, and you're going to write down this rule. To add decimals, you want to make sure that you line up the decimals and then add the digits that are in the same place value. All right, so here for the accuracy, it says to find an accurate sum or difference, we want to line up the digits based on their place values. Use the decimal point to help align the correct digits before completing the operation. Now, I do want to let you know that when you are showing your work with this, I know some of you guys write, some of you all write really fast, and sometimes your numbers don't align. When you're adding decimals, you need to make sure that you have nice, neat columns so that you don't add incorrectly or subtract incorrectly. Okay? All right. So for example 1, it says find the sum of 23.1 and 5.8. So what we do is we line up the decimal points. We have 23.1, and then the 5 goes under the 3 because that's in the ones place. Then there's a decimal, and then the 8 goes in the tenths place right under the 1. So you line up the decimals, and then you just add like normal. And it's as simple as that. All right, for the second example, here, let's see, it says find the sum of 29.6 and 14.7. If you want to write this down, you can. But this is not one of the guidance. So here, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to line up the numbers with the correct place values. So you have 29.6, so that's going to be 29. There's the decimal, 0.6. And then we're going to add 14.7. So 14.7. Okay? And then you just add like normal. You add the tens place, the ones place, and the tens place. So 6 plus 7 is 13, carry the 1. Then we have 9 plus 1 is 10, plus 4 is 14, carry the 1, and then this gives us 4. Very good. So our answer is 44.3. Is everybody clear? All right, so let's do these got problems. So for the first one, we have 54.7 plus 21.4. Remember, when adding decimals, you want to reposition the numbers and line up the decimals. So this is what I did right here. Okay, so when you see them written horizontally, you're going to have to rewrite it vertically. All right, you ready for example A? So here, we line up the decimals in each of the numbers, and then we just add like normal. So 7 plus 4 is 11, carry the 1. Then 4 plus 1 plus 1 is 6. And then 5 plus 2 is 7. And then, of course, the decimal stays in the same place. Is everybody with me? All right. Same thing with example 2. We have 14 and 2/10 plus 23 and 5/10. You line up the decimals. And here you can just bring down the decimal if you want to. Just put it down like that. And then we have 2 plus 5, 7. 4 plus 3, 7. And then 1 plus 2 is 3. All right, so now we have 17 and 3/10 plus 33 and 5/10. All right, so for example C, when you got your answer, there we have 50.8. So now we're going to subtract decimals. So to subtract decimals, it's the same thing. You need to line up your decimals, and then you will subtract the digits in the same place value position like normal. Okay? There is one difference here, is that you may need to annex zeros. And what that means is that you might need to add zeros in the top number. Okay? So write this down. You may need to annex or place zeros at the end of a decimal. Okay? And we'll do a couple of examples. We'll do some examples of those too. Okay, so for example 3, it says find the difference of 5.774 and 2.371. Here, this is tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. Very good. So this is 5 and 774 thousandths, and this is 2 and 371 thousandths. Okay? So when we subtract, here we subtract the 5.774 minus 2.371. You line up your decimals, and then you subtract like normal. Okay? For example 4, here we have 6 minus 4.78. 6 minus 4 and 78 hundredths. Now, this is an example, you guys, of when you are adding zeros, where you are annexing the zeros. Does everybody see that? Because when you line them up, if there's nothing there, let me see if I can cross that out. If there's nothing there, can I subtract the 7 and 8 from something? No. That's why we have to put the zeros in, okay? So once we annex the zeros, then we can subtract like normal. And with this one, of course, it's going to require some regrouping. So you have to borrow from the 6 to make that a 10, and then you're going to borrow from the 10 to make that a 9, and then that's going to be 10. So 10 minus 8 gives me 2, and then 9 minus 7 gives me 2, and then this one, all right, was going to be a 5, so 5 minus 4 is 1. Is everybody clear with that? All right. So let's do one where we have to annex some zeros, okay? So here we're going to subtract 23 minus 4 and 216 thousandths. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to line up our decimals. So we have 23, and then we're going to subtract 4 and 216 thousandths. Now, because I have nothing up here to subtract the 2 and 1 and 6 from, then I need to annex those zeros. So I need to put zeros in there. Is everybody with me so far? Everybody good? All right. So now we can subtract like normal. And when we subtract like normal, of course, we have to borrow, okay, or regroup. So here we're going to borrow from the 3. That's going to become a 2. And this becomes a 10, right? But I still can't do the subtracting the 1 and the 6. So now I have to borrow from that 10, right? So this becomes a 9, and this becomes a 10, right? And now I still can't borrow, I can't subtract the 6, so now I have to borrow from that 10. This becomes a 9, and now that becomes a 10, and now I can do some subtracting, right? So when we subtract, we end up with 4 here, 8, 7, there's the decimal, and then 2 minus 4, oh, can I just say 22 minus 4? Yeah, here let's just show the actual borrowing. So we're going to have to borrow from this 2, right? That becomes a 1, and that becomes a 12, and then 12 minus 4 is 8, and that's 18. So we have 18 and 784 thousandths. All right, don't forget that when we are subtracting decimals, you're going to reposition the numbers and line up the decimals. And then you may need to add the decimal, like over here on example C, you might need to add the decimals and annex some zeros. Is everybody clear that? Don't forget that if you have a whole number and you don't see a decimal, where is the decimal? At the end. So here's the 14. Look at this 14, guys. See that 14? You see a decimal in that number? Where is the decimal? It's at the end. Does everybody see that? Okay? Just don't forget, if there's a whole number, it's after the ones place. Okay? All right. So now you're just going to line up your decimals, and then you just subtract like normal. So 3 minus 1, 2, and then here we're going to have to borrow. So this 5 becomes a 4. And so 14 minus 7 is 7. And then I can't do 4 minus 6, so I need to borrow. So this becomes an 8. And that 4 becomes a 14 now. And 14 minus 6 is 8. And then there's a decimal. And then 8 minus 3 is 5. So, for example, E, we have $50.62, and we're going to subtract $39.81. Now, remember, when you're talking about money, you don't say $50.62, okay? You say $50.62. And when it's money, it only goes out to the hundredths place, right? So, all right, so now we subtract. So 2 minus 1 is 1. And then we can't do 6 minus 8, so we need to borrow. Uh-oh, I can't borrow from the 0. I have to borrow from the 5. So this becomes 4 over there, and then that 0 becomes a 10. So now I can borrow from the 10. This becomes a 9, and that 6 becomes 16. So now I can do 16 minus 8, which is 8. There's my decimal. And then 9 minus 9 is 0, and then 4 minus 3 is 1. And don't forget to bring your dollar sign down. So we have $10.81. Okay? So for example, F, here, there's, like we said, there's no decimal, so we need to put that decimal at the end of the whole number. So there's my decimal. And then I have to add the zeros. What's the word? Annex the 0. Very good. So we're going to annex the zeros. I'm going to make this green just so I have a different color. So we're going to annex the zeros, and now we can do some regrouping and do some subtracting. Okay? So we're going to borrow from the 4. That becomes a 3. And then that 0 becomes a 10. But I still can't subtract the 9, so I'm going to borrow from that 10. That becomes a 9. And now we can subtract. So 10 minus 9 is 1. 9 minus 0 is 9. There's my decimal. And then I'm gonna, you can't, see how this, if I borrowed from this 1, that's gonna be a 0, right? And then this 3 becomes a 13. Does everybody see that's already 13? You see? So if you have something like that, then you can just subtract 13 minus 9, right? So 13 minus 9 is going to be 4. And there's your final answer. So for example 6, this one you don't have to write down. It says Reagan is creating a video. The first video clip was 22.36 minutes long. The second video clip was 17.03 minutes long. What is the total length of the video? What word tells me the operation here? Total. Very good. And of course, total tells me that we're going to add. Very good. So we add 22.36 plus 17.03. Line up your decimals and then add like normal. Okay, so 6 plus 3 is 9. 3 plus 0 is 3. There's the decimal. 2 plus 7 is 9. And then 2 plus 1 is 3. So the video is 39.39 minutes long. All right, so for the got it, Jonathan is traveling for work. This morning, his GPS indicated that the total distance to his destination is 589.4 miles. Before lunch, he drove 208.62 miles. How much farther does Jonathan need to travel? What operation are we going to do here? Subtracting. Very good, because we want to know how much farther do we have to go, right? So we are going to subtract the total, which was the 589.4 miles, and we're going to subtract 208, how much he already drove, 208.62. Very good. So don't forget, we need to annex the 0 right there. So now we can subtract like normal. All right, so we can't subtract 2, so we're going to borrow from the 4. So that becomes a 3, and now 10 minus 2 is 8. Now here we can't subtract 3 minus 6, so we're going to borrow from the 9. So the 9 becomes an 8, and this becomes a 13. So 13 minus 6 is 7, and then there's my decimal. And then 8 minus 8 is 0. 8 minus 0, 8. And 5 minus 2 is 3. So that means he has to drive 380.78 more miles. Don't forget, you must write your label, especially for the word problems. Good?